Hey everyone, it's Nick Valenti with NJ Valenti Art, and today I'm going to show you how to draw Kid Goku from sketch to vector. So I'm working in Affinity Designer in the pixel persona to start the drawing process here for Kid Goku. Right now I'm just laying in the overall shape of his head and starting to work in the features. I am using the symmetry tool with the mirror function on to get an even side to side for his overall head shape and his chest here, turning off the symmetry mode when I'm working on his hair. From time to time too, I will go ahead and create a new layer to continue to refine the drawing and start considering line quality for when I get to the actual vector inking part of the process. And so I created another new layer here, and I'm continuing to refine the lines. I'm really thinking about line quality here, between thin to thick lines and how these lines are overlapping each other to avoid any tangents or other mistakes that might draw your eye away from the actual image itself. So here I'm going to zoom in a bit to start working on the features of his face. These are going to be my final lines before inking, so I'm paying a lot of attention to how they look and considering how I'm going to go about the inking process. So I'm keeping that in mind as I'm creating these final pencil lines for the drawing itself. It does help to think ahead of the process a little bit, to have some sort of direction for where you're going with your illustration. So when I'm working in these final pencil lines, I'm really considering how I'm going to be inking them and controlling the line quality once I get there. Because I want the inking part of the process to be fairly automated, I don't want to be too concerned with making any major corrections. I really want to just focus on that point of making the lines look good and cohesive with the illustration as a whole. I started a new layer behind the Kid Goku drawing in order to start working out the energy blast effects that I want to have in the background behind him. So here I've moved over to the designer persona in Affinity Designer while I'll be doing my actual vector inking. And I'm just kind of moving my layers around a little bit. I'll have my base layer of white so I can see what I'm doing at the very bottom. Above that I'll have the drawing of my energy blast layer. The layer above that will be the drawing of Kid Goku. So I'll start a brand new layer where I'll start my vector inking, and I'll have that layer above the drawing of Kid Goku to start. I'm coming into the hair, and I've just used the pen tool to create a stroke to create the actual outline of the hair, and I'm doing the same for the face now. I do have a video that I'll link up in the right hand corner on stroke versus fill and how to go about different inking techniques for Affinity Designer. So I can control my stroke line a bit by using the pressure tab on the strokes menu, and that'll allow me to taper both sides of the line or one side at a time so I can get a nice thin to thick to thin or thin to thick line. Again, a way to control that line quality and make the lines really pop. So at this point I decided to jump ahead just a little bit. I was really kind of excited about the energy blast background, so I wanted to throw that in here real quick before finishing up the rest of the vector inking. So I've started a layer right above my white base layer to just start working on that energy effect. I've got the main shape in there. Now you can see I'm coming back and doing the large main energy blast in the background. So once I get this all set, this will be the layer below the rest of my inking layers at this point. Here I've switched over to a different inking technique, which again I covered in one of my previous videos, stroke versus fill. These lines on his garment here are a little more stylized and have some sharper edges, and I wanted to make sure that I captured that. So instead of using just the stroke function, I decided to come in and use the fill feature where I'm drawing each side of the line, and that helps me really control the thick to thin and get a more stylized look. So you can see me doing that here. I'm finishing up the inking process here by working on his features, and again I'm back to using just the stroke function to create these final lines before we move on to the colors. So here I'm starting the coloring process. So I've started a new layer under the vector inks layer, and I'm starting with the large main shape of his hair, and I'm just outlining that whole shape, and I'll fill that with gray before coming back and adding the black chunks of color to his hair as well. And again here I'm just starting with the largest shapes of color first, and then I'll start adding the smaller shapes of color on top. So the eyebrow colors, the eye color themselves as well. But I always start with the largest shape in the back before moving forward. I really enjoy using the gradient fill tool when it comes to base colors. So what I do here is I'll get the main shape of color in, and I'll select my main color, so that blue and that orange. I'll then go over to the gradient fill tool and I'll mess around with making them a little lighter and darker and giving myself some sort of gradation between light and dark. And I find that this is just really effective as a base layer of color when we start adding the shadow layer and highlights layer on top of it. It makes it pop a little bit more in my opinion. I'm starting to work in my shadows here. Now the shadow layer is going to sit above the base color layer for Kid Goku, but below the vector ink layer. I have the shadow layer set on multiply, and I've selected a fairly light color, and that will just kind of create this nice shadow effect. I also will come in and play with the gradient fill tool as you see here as well, to get a little bit of a light to dark transition even in the shadows. As I'm working in the shadow shapes, I'm keeping in mind the light source. There's this major energy effect behind him, so there's going to be a lot of light coming from behind him, and a little bit later on in the illustration I add some front light as well. So I have the light kind of going off to his right side of his face, the left side of our screen, with a little bit of light coming in from behind him as well, and you'll see how that kind of translates a little bit further into the illustration. shadows here, I'm keeping them down below any of the creases and thinking about areas where any of the wrinkles might be creating any sort of cast shadows on the rest of his garment, and keeping the shadows kind of away from the light source. This will help kind of build a lot of depth in the illustration. The shadow layer finished, I've moved on to the highlight layer. Now this highlight layer will sit above the base color layer as well as the shadow layer, and I've set the layer mode to screen. That will give us that cell shaded look. So for the light layer, I'm doing the opposite of what I did with the shadow layer, and I'm keeping all of my highlights to the tops of the shapes, so the opposite side of the shadows, and that'll help create a lot of depth. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more videos coming soon. See you next time.